My name is Marie Reynolds, and I'm 68 years old. I worked as a nurse in Boston for 40 years, saving every penny I could. My son Thomas was my world. When he and his wife Jessica fell into debt, I paid off their $270,000 and gave them my house for a fresh start. The very next day, they sold my home and vanished overseas. All I found was a note from Jessica. "Loser old woman, you stink." The betrayal nearly destroyed me, but somehow I found my way back. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how I survived the ultimate family betrayal. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in South Boston, the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress. My parents taught me the value of hard work and saving for the future. Those lessons served me well when I began my nursing career at Boston Memorial Hospital at 22. I loved every minute of my 40 years there, working my way up from staff nurse to nursing supervisor before retiring. Life threw me a curveball when my husband Frank died of a sudden heart attack. Thomas was only 8 at the time. Losing Frank was devastating, but I had to stay strong for our son. I took on extra shifts and weekend work to make sure Thomas had everything he needed. We were a team, just the two of us, against the world. I can still remember those Sunday afternoons when Thomas and I would go fishing at the lake. He was such a thoughtful boy, always telling me about his day at school and his dreams for the future. As a single mother, I made sure he had the best education possible. I worked overtime shifts for years so he could attend a good private high school and later a prestigious college for accounting. Those were happy years, despite the challenges. Thomas excelled academically and made me so proud when he graduated with honors and landed a job at Palmer & Associates, one of the top accounting firms in Boston. I felt like all my sacrifices had been worthwhile. Everything changed during his final year of college when he met Jessica. She was studying marketing and came from a wealthy family in Connecticut. I still remember the day he brought her home to meet me. She was beautiful, with her perfect blonde hair and designer clothes. She complimented my quaint house and seemed impressed by Thomas's stories of his childhood. I was just happy to see my son so in love. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs. Jessica rarely asked questions about our family or showed interest in Thomas's background. When I mentioned how proud I was that Thomas had worked part-time throughout college to help with expenses, she seemed almost embarrassed. "That's so unnecessary nowadays," she said, with a little laugh that made me feel suddenly old-fashioned. Their wedding was extravagant, far beyond what I thought appropriate. Thomas asked if I could contribute, and of course I did. I withdrew $20,000 from my retirement savings to help pay for their special day. The ceremony was at an exclusive country club that Jessica's parents belonged to, though I later learned they contributed very little to the wedding costs, despite their apparent wealth. After the wedding, I saw Thomas less and less. Sunday dinners became monthly, then occasional. When they did visit, Jessica would check her phone constantly or make excuses to leave early. Thomas seemed different too, more concerned with appearances and status than I'd ever known him to be. By the time I retired at 65, I had a comfortable nest egg, and my modest 3-bedroom house was completely paid off. I had planned carefully for my golden years, expecting to travel a little, volunteer at the hospital, and spend time with family. I had approximately $350,000 in retirement accounts, which combined with my Social Security and small pension would have been enough for a comfortable, if modest, retirement. Thomas called less frequently after I retired. When I would call him, Jessica often answered and explained that he was too busy with work to come to the phone. I tried to maintain the relationship, sending cards and gifts for birthdays and holidays, always including personal notes about how much I missed them. "He's building his career, Mom," Thomas told me when I finally expressed my hurt feelings. "We're just really busy right now. You understand, right?" I did understand, or at least I thought I did. The first hints that something was wrong came about 2 years into their marriage. Thomas drove up to my house in a brand new luxury SUV that must have cost at least $80,000. When I commented on it, he shrugged and said, "We deserve nice things, Mom. I'm making good money now." A few months later, Thomas was promoted to senior accountant, and they moved from their starter home to a large colonial in an exclusive suburb. The house was beautiful, with 5 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and a backyard with a built-in swimming pool. When I visited for the first time, Jessica gave me a tour, pointing out the imported marble countertops and custom cabinetry in the kitchen. "It's all about image in Thomas's position," she explained. "His clients expect a certain lifestyle." I nodded, though I couldn't help thinking about my own modest home and wondering if Thomas was embarrassed by it now. Around this time, Jessica quit her marketing job to become what she called a lifestyle influencer on social media. She spent hours taking photos of herself in expensive outfits, posing in their beautiful home, or at luxury resorts. When I asked Thomas if this was financially wise, he assured me that Jessica was building her brand and would soon be making more than she had in her corporate job. My granddaughter Lily was born the following year, and I fell in love with her instantly. She had Thomas's warm brown eyes and curious nature. I offered to babysit regularly to help out, but Jessica insisted on hiring a nanny instead. "We want you to enjoy your role as grandma, not be burdened with childcare," she said. I was disappointed, but tried to respect their decision. When I did visit, I noticed tension in the house. Once, while I was playing with Lily in the living room, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. "The minimum payment isn't enough anymore," Thomas hissed. "They're going to start calling." "Just move some money around," Jessica replied dismissively. "That's what you do all day, isn't it?" The argument stopped when they realized I might be listening, and they emerged from the kitchen with forced smiles. I pretended not to have heard anything, but worry had already taken root in my heart. Thanksgiving that year was particularly tense. Jessica had insisted on hosting and went all out with expensive decorations and gourmet food. When I offered to bring my traditional apple pie, Jessica said, "We're having a professional dessert spread delivered, but thanks." Throughout the meal, she seemed on edge, snapping at the nanny and even at Thomas when he mentioned an upcoming business trip. After dinner, Thomas helped me with my coat. He looked thinner than usual, with dark circles under his eyes. "Is everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked quietly. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just work stress, Mom. End of the year is always tough." A week later, Thomas called and hesitantly mentioned some temporary cash flow issues. I immediately offered to help, but he insisted it was just a timing problem with some investments. "I don't want you to worry, Mom. We're fine, really." Despite his reassurances, I started sending small checks, $500 here, $1,000 there, with notes saying it was for Lily's college fund or just because I was thinking of them. Thomas initially tried to refuse, but eventually he began accepting the money with promises to pay me back soon. The first direct request came a few months later. Thomas called, asking if I could lend him $5,000 for car repairs. I transferred the money immediately, but when I visited the following week, I noticed both their vehicles looked perfectly fine. When I casually mentioned it, Thomas became flustered and said they had decided to put off the repairs for a bit longer. The repayment deadline for that first loan came and went. When I gently reminded Thomas, he apologized profusely and promised to pay me back with his next bonus. Then, he stopped answering my calls for a while. I turned to social media to check on them and was confused by what I saw. Jessica was posting photos from a spa weekend with friends showing off new jewelry and announcing they were renovating their master bathroom with a steam shower and heated floors. None of this aligned with the financial difficulties Thomas had hinted at. Lily's third birthday party was elaborate, with a rented carousel in the backyard and a professional photographer documenting everything. I brought a handmade quilt I'd spent months creating, but Jessica barely acknowledged it, placing it aside to make room for more expensive gifts. Throughout the party, she was cold toward me, introducing me to her friends simply as Thomas's mother, rather than by my name. The distance between me and my granddaughter grew as well. Whenever I tried to make plans to see Lily, Jessica would say they were too busy, or Lily had other activities. My heart ached, knowing I was missing precious moments of her childhood. The call that changed everything came at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I was already in bed when my phone rang. It was Thomas, and he sounded unlike I'd ever heard him before. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I need your help. We're in trouble." I drove to their house immediately, still in my nightgown, with a coat thrown over it. When I arrived, the grand house that had always been immaculate was in disarray. Drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across the dining room table, and Jessica was pacing in the kitchen, her face streaked with mascara. Thomas sat me down in the living room and finally told me the truth. What had started as a few unwise investments had spiraled into a gambling addiction. He had been trying to recoup his losses by betting more, digging himself deeper with each attempt. There were maxed-out credit cards, second mortgages, personal loans from banks, and worse money borrowed from private lenders who were now threatening him. Jessica didn't know how bad it was until recently, he said, though the sideways glance she gave him made me wonder about that claim. Then, Jessica revealed her part in their financial disaster. She had opened multiple credit cards without Thomas's knowledge, spending lavishly on clothes, jewelry, and home decor to maintain her image as a successful influencer. She had even taken out loans against her car and jewelry. Between them, they had accumulated $270,000 in debt. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage, facing possible foreclosure, and the private lenders Thomas had mentioned were sending increasingly threatening messages. I sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of their situation sank in. My entire retirement savings wouldn't even cover their debt entirely. "How could you let this happen?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jessica's response shocked me. "This is his fault," she snapped, pointing at Thomas. "He's supposed to be the financial expert. I trusted him to manage our money properly." Thomas seemed to shrink under her attack. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "Terrible mistakes. But we both spent beyond our means." As they continued arguing, I witnessed a side of their relationship I'd never seen before. Jessica's voice turned cruel as she berated Thomas, calling him incompetent and pathetic. My son, once so confident and ambitious, looked broken and defeated. My thoughts turned to Lily. She was asleep upstairs, innocent and unaware of the chaos threatening her security. What would happen to her if they lost everything? As if reading my thoughts, Jessica suddenly changed tactics. If we lose this house, I'm taking Lily and going to my parents, she threatened. I won't have my daughter living in some cramped apartment in a bad neighborhood. Thomas looked panicked. Mom, he pleaded, I know I have no right to ask, but we need help. I can't lose my family. Please. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with impossible calculations. Even if I liquidated everything, I would barely cover their debt. And then, what would I live on? I was 68, unlikely to find employment that could support me. I had worked my entire life for the security I now had. For 3 nights, I barely slept. I called my closest friend Susan, who had known Thomas since he was a baby. Marie, you can't do this, she said firmly. They made their bed, and even if you bail them out now, what's to stop them from doing it again? I knew she was right, but then I thought about Lily growing up without her father, or Thomas, possibly facing dangerous loan sharks. I thought about my late husband Frank, and what he would want me to do for our only child. I raised him better than this. I told Susan, tears streaming down my face. Where did I go wrong? You didn't go wrong, Susan replied gently. Thomas is an adult who made his own choices. You can't sacrifice your future for his mistakes. But even as she said it, I knew what I was going to do. The following Monday, I met with my financial advisor, Richard, who had helped me plan for retirement for the past 20 years. Marie, this is financially suicidal, he said bluntly when I explained what I was considering. You'll have almost nothing left. At your age, you can't recover from this kind of financial setback. They're my family, I said simply. I don't have a choice. Richard shook his head. At least keep the house. It's paid off, and housing costs would eat up whatever you have left if you give that up too. But I had already made up my mind. Thomas and Jessica's house was underwater and associated with too much financial trauma. They needed a truly fresh start, and my modest but fully paid off house would give them that. They could sell their current house to pay off the portion of debt I couldn't cover and start over without the crushing burden of a mortgage. The process was painful. I liquidated my retirement accounts, paying heavy, early withdrawal penalties and taxes. I sold my stocks and bonds, emptied my savings account, and visited my lawyer to draw up paperwork transferring my house to Thomas and Jessica. All told, I was able to give them $220,000 in cash, and my house worth approximately $300,000. I found a small, 1-bedroom apartment in a less desirable area of the city. The monthly rent would take a significant portion of my remaining funds and Social Security check, but I could make it work if I was extremely careful. I packed up 46 years of memories, donating most of my furniture and keeping only what would fit in the tiny apartment. When I presented Thomas with the checks and house deed, he broke down in tears. "Mom, I don't deserve this," he sobbed. "I'll pay you back every penny, I swear. And the house will always be your home, too." Jessica hugged me tightly. "Marie, I don't know how to thank you," she said, her eyes also filled with tears. "You've saved us. We won't waste this second chance." I wanted to believe them both, needed to believe them. "You don't have to pay me back," I told Thomas. "Just be the man I raised you to be. Take care of your family and rebuild your life. That's all I ask." The night before I handed over the keys, we had a farewell dinner in my house, now their house. I made all of Thomas's favorite foods, and we reminisced about his childhood in these rooms. Lily sat on my lap, confused about why Grandma's things were in boxes, Will you still come see me, Grandma? She asked. Of course, sweetie, I assured her. I'll visit all the time. And you can come see my new place too. Thomas put his arm around me. We'll have Sunday dinner every week, he promised. Nothing is going to change between us. That first night in my apartment was strange, but not entirely unpleasant. The place was small, but clean, and there was something freeing about having fewer possessions. I went to sleep feeling hopeful that my sacrifice would give Thomas and his family the fresh start they needed. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to surprise them with breakfast. I stopped at a bakery and picked up fresh muffins and coffee, along with a small houseplant as a housewarming gift. As I turned onto my old street, my heart nearly stopped. There in the front yard was a for sale sign with Premier Properties across the top. Surely there was a mistake. I parked and walked up to the house in a daze. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Kendall, was watering her flowers and waved to me. Marie, I was surprised to see the house on the market so soon after you moved out. Are you okay? The young couple was here with a real estate agent first thing this morning. My hands shook as I tried my key in the door, but it no longer worked. They had changed the locks already. I peeked through the windows and saw that the house was completely empty. All of my carefully packed moving boxes were gone, along with the few pieces of furniture I had left behind for them. I called Thomas's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again with the same result. With growing panic, I checked Jessica's social media accounts, but they had all been deactivated or deleted. In desperation, I drove to Thomas's workplace. The receptionist looked confused when I asked for him. Thomas Reynolds. He resigned yesterday. Cleaned out his desk and everything. Is there someone else who can help you? I felt like I was in a nightmare. Back at the house, I found the real estate agent showing the property to a young couple. When I approached him afterward, he confirmed my worst fears. Yes, the owners listed it this morning. They're accepting cash offers only and want a quick closing. They've already moved out. Did they leave any message for Marie Reynolds? I'm Thomas's mother. I explained, my voice barely steady. The agent looked uncomfortable. I think there might be something inside. Let me check. He returned a few minutes later with a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Jessica's handwriting. Loser, old woman, you stink. Thanks for the cash. Enjoy your pathetic life alone. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the curb, the paper clutched in my trembling hand. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Not just the theft of everything I owned, but the deliberate, calculated meanness of that final message. I went to the police, but they explained that since I had legally given them the house and money, it was a civil matter, not criminal. I would need to sue them to try to recover anything. The real estate agent later called to tell me they had accepted a cash offer, $20,000 below asking price, in exchange for closing within the week. Another call to my lawyer confirmed my worst fear. Thomas and Jessica had already left the country. A friend of Thomas from college worked at the bank and reluctantly told me they had transferred all the funds to an offshore account and booked one-way tickets to Belize, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. They were gone. My son, daughter-in-law, granddaughter, home, and life savings, all gone in less than 24 hours. I don't remember much of the next few days. Susan found me in my apartment, unwashed and unfed. The reality of what had happened was too enormous to process. I had been completely and utterly betrayed by the person I loved most in the world. Over the following weeks, I lost 20 pounds. Sleep was impossible without medication. The humiliation was almost worse than the financial devastation. How could I tell people that my own son had conned me out of everything, that I had been so blind, so foolish. The financial reality was grim. I had less than $30,000 left, a small Social Security check, and a part-time pension that together barely covered my rent. At 68, I was essentially broke with no assets and little income. But the loss of Lily was what broke my heart the most. My precious granddaughter, taken to another country, probably never to be seen again. Would she even remember me as she grew up? Would Thomas and Jessica tell her lies about why they left? The thought of her being raised by people capable of such callous cruelty kept me awake at night. For 2 months, I barely left my apartment except to buy groceries. I stopped answering calls from friends, too ashamed to speak to anyone. The depression was like a physical weight pressing down on me, making even simple tasks like showering seem impossible. Eventually, necessity forced me back into the world. My dwindling funds meant I needed to find work. I applied for a part-time position as a nursing assistant at a local clinic. The pay was minimal, but it was something. The physical demands of the job were difficult for someone my age, especially after years away from direct patient care. My back ached constantly, and my feet swelled painfully after each shift. One evening at the grocery store, selecting the cheapest items I could find, I ran into Susan. I tried to avoid her, but she spotted me and wouldn't let me escape. "Marie Reynolds, don't you dare walk away from me," she said firmly. "I've been worried sick about you." She took one look at my cart, filled with ramen noodles and canned beans, and insisted on taking me to dinner. Over the meal, the first proper food I'd had in weeks, she delivered some hard truths. "What happened to you is horrific," she said, reaching for my hand. "But hiding away and punishing yourself won't change anything. Thomas and Jessica are the villains here, not you. Your only crime was loving your son too much." Susan told me about a support group for victims of financial abuse. "It's mostly elderly people who've been scammed by family members," she explained. "You're not alone in this, Marie." Reluctantly, I agreed to attend a meeting. The room was filled with people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, all with similar stories of betrayal by those they trusted most. A woman named Dorothy had given her life savings to a nephew who promised to build her an in-law suite at his home, only to disappear with the money. A man named Howard had co-signed a loan for his son's business, only to be left with the debt when his son declared bankruptcy and moved to Florida. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt understood. These people didn't judge me for my naivety or foolishness. They had been there themselves. When I finally shared my story, the simple act of speaking it aloud was cathartic. One of the group members, Alan, was a retired lawyer who specialized in elder law. "What happened to you is unfortunately common," he told me. "Family financial abuse of the elderly is an epidemic, but people don't talk about it because of shame." Alan offered to help me pro bono to see if any assets could be recovered. He warned me not to get my hopes up. International financial recovery was complicated and often unsuccessful, but he would try. The support group became my lifeline. Each week, I gained a little more strength from their stories of survival and gradual recovery. The therapist who led the group helped me process my anger, an emotion I had suppressed my entire life. "You're allowed to be furious," she told me. "What they did was evil. Don't bury that anger. Use it as fuel to rebuild." Slowly, I began to reconnect with old friends from the hospital. Many were shocked by what had happened, but none judged me as harshly as I had judged myself. My former supervisor offered me additional hours at the clinic, and a colleague invited me to volunteer at a community health center where she worked. The volunteer work became unexpectedly fulfilling. I was using my nursing skills to help underserved populations, people who were grateful for the care I provided. For a few hours each week, I could focus on others' needs instead of my own pain. There were still dark days when the magnitude of the betrayal overwhelmed me. Birthdays, holidays, and especially Lily's birthday, were particularly painful. But I was no longer drowning in despair. I was swimming, barely keeping my head above water sometimes, but swimming nonetheless. 1 year after that devastating morning, when I discovered their betrayal, I was sitting in Alan's office, receiving unexpected news. "We've managed to recover about $40,000, he said, sliding a document across his desk. "It's not much compared to what you lost, but it's something." Apparently, Thomas had opened a separate account in just his name before they left, and that account had been overlooked in their hasty departure. Alan had successfully argued that the money should be returned to me. The recovered funds allowed me to move to a slightly better apartment in a safer neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it had a small patio where I could grow flowers, a luxury that brought me surprising joy. Through my support group, I had formed deep friendships with people who understood my journey. Dorothy Howard and I often had dinner together, sharing small victories and supporting each other through difficult anniversaries and triggers. I had also started a small side business, offering home health consultations for families caring for elderly relatives. My nursing background and personal experience made me uniquely qualified to help others navigate the challenges of aging and family care. The extra income wasn't substantial, but it helped ease my financial strain and gave me purpose. On my 69th birthday, I received a letter from a former patient I had cared for decades ago. She had tracked me down through mutual connections at the hospital to thank me for the compassion I had shown her during a difficult health crisis. "You probably don't remember me," she wrote, "but I've never forgotten your kindness. You made a difference in my life when I needed it most." Her words reminded me that my life had value beyond my role as Thomas's mother. I had touched many lives during my nursing career, and I still had more to give. Through Alan, I began speaking at community centers about elder financial abuse. Sharing my story publicly was terrifying at first, but the response was overwhelming. People would approach me afterward, sometimes in tears, sharing similar experiences, or thanking me for helping them understand what their parents or grandparents had endured. These talks evolved into a volunteer position with a local nonprofit focused on elder rights and protection. I couldn't change what had happened to me, but I could help others avoid the same fate or find their way back if they had already fallen victim. 6 months later, I received an email that stopped my heart momentarily. It was from Thomas. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't insult you by asking for it. Jessica and I separated 3 months ago. She took most of the money and Lily. I was too cowardly to stop her. I'm working as a bookkeeper at a small resort here. It's not much, but it's honest work. I think about you every day and what I did to you. There's no excuse. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what a monster I became, and I'm sorry. Thomas." I read and reread the email countless times, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to respond with all the rage and pain I had carried, but another part, the mother who had loved him unconditionally, felt a complicated relief that he had at least acknowledged what he'd done. I didn't respond immediately. I brought the email to my therapy group and to Susan, seeking guidance on whether to engage at all. In the end, I sent a brief reply. I've received your email. I need time. It was all I could offer at that point. The hardest part of my recovery wasn't forgiving Thomas. I wasn't sure I ever could or should, but forgiving myself for my blind trust and naive belief that love was enough. I had to accept that my desire to be needed by my son had clouded my judgment, making me an easy target for manipulation. Through therapy and countless support group meetings, I gradually came to understand that being victimized didn't make me weak or stupid. It made me human. My capacity for love and sacrifice, which Thomas and Jessica had exploited so cruelly, was also my greatest strength. Today, at 70, I live simply, but with dignity. My small apartment is filled with plants and books. I work part-time, volunteer regularly, and have a circle of friends who truly value me. I still have moments of anger and grief, particularly when I think of Lily growing up without knowing how much her grandmother loves her. But those moments no longer define me. If there's one lesson I've learned from this painful journey, it's that true family isn't always defined by blood. The friends who stood by me, the strangers who became supporters, the communities that embraced me, they became my family when my own son abandoned me. I've also learned that love requires boundaries to be healthy. Sacrifice without limits isn't noble. It's self-destruction. By trying to save my son from the consequences of his actions, I enabled behavior that ultimately hurt us all. Most importantly, I've discovered strength I never knew I possessed. At an age when many people are settling into comfortable retirement, I was forced to rebuild my life from nothing. The fact that I'm still here, still contributing, still finding joy in small things, that's my victory over betrayal. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? Or have you had to rebuild your life after a significant loss or betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's struggling to find their way forward. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear that survival is possible even after the deepest betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat yourself.